SANDHAN, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.
Hello friends, I'm your teacher. My name is Rucha Brahmbhatt and I welcome you to this integrated classroom, the virtual classroom. And I have today with me Professor Vaibhavbhai Kothari. And as you know, today we are going to talk about George Bernard Shaw's celebrated work, that is The Arms and the Man. Friends, I know that you have studied about comedy at length in the last lecture, and today we have narrowed down our topic to a work which is so much celebrated, which is considered as a classic, which is considered as the finest comedy of all times, that is George Bernard Shaw's Arms and the Man. Friends, George Bernard Shaw, he was born in Dublin in 1856 and he died on 2nd November in 1950. George Bernard Shaw, he was an Irish playwright and he had an irregular education because right from the childhood he did not believe in any organizational pattern. So he condemned the syllabi which was offered to him, he condemned the system which was offered to him, and so he did not allow himself to go through the regular schooling pattern. Then at a very early age he started working as a clerk in a real estate's office. Shaw's mother was a musician and two of his sisters were also into the English opera. So he had a kind of inclination towards music right from his childhood, and so he decided to become a music critic. Around 1876, he left Dublin and came to England, settled down in London with his mother and started writing reviews on music. And from there, his journey began as a critic, and after writing criticism, he moved to theatre, into acting, as a producer, as a dramatist. We will talk about Bernard Shaw as a dramatist, but before that, friends, as you know, that no writer exists in alienation or in a world. Any writer, when we study any writer, we must know the background. So the background of Bernard Shaw that begins around 1850 and that covers almost a century. Bernard Shaw witnessed tremendous events, the events that had shaken the Western world. The first one, as you have already studied in history, was the industrialization. In 1850, around 1850, industrialization was at the peak. This was a time when the working class came into existence. Before that, there was a kind of agrarian society, a kind of agrarian culture in Europe, and now that agrarian culture that transformed into industrial society, and with that transformations, many problems arose. And one could clearly see a gap between the working class and the upper class. There was a clear class distinction, and clashes and struggles started between two different classes. Also, this was a time, if we look at the decades between 1850 and 1900, one of the revolutionary theory that was propounded during this time was by Charles Darwin. And Darwin challenged the conservative ideas in England. Also, there was a group of or a school of people that followed Darwin's ideas of evolution, something that punctured the very idea of church, the very idea of religion, that man is a creation of God. Also, this was the time that Sigmund Freud came up with his psychoanalytical theories, and the school of psychology became popular. All this, so there was a conflict between conservatism and the new ideologies. Bernard Shaw, being a reformist, he decided to be with new ideologies. Also, this was a time when the anti-romantic movement started. That is that the romanticism was being questioned. The idea of hero, the idea of a brave person, all such traditional preconditioned notions, they were being challenged. Also, in the beginning of 20th century, what Bernard Shaw could witness was a mega event, that is a great war, that is the First World War, and it was to balance between the foreign imperialistic policies of European countries. And Bernard Shaw was very, very critical of imperialism. He could also witness the Second World War on the name of religion. And so, in his plays, in his writings, in his essays, in his short stories, we can see the reflections of these events at a length. And this was a time between the clashes, and in the struggle, Bernard Shaw created his own stand, and he stood out as a very different independent writer, a philosopher. His philosophy is known as Shavian philosophy today, Shavian ideology, with a very different perspective, and that demanded courage, the brevity that he had. And also there were influences on Bernard Shaw from literary groups. And let us talk about the state of drama during his lifetime. That is covered the entire century, right from 1850 to 1950. So I'll request Professor Vaibhav Bhai to tell us something about the state of drama during the time of George Bernard Shaw.
Good morning, friends. As you know that the Elizabethan age in English literature was considered to be the golden age of drama, and as T.S. Eliot has pointed out in his collection of critical essays, Sacred Wood, that there is no precedence of having two golden ages of drama in the history of any nation. And obviously drama, the decline of drama is very much visible in the Victorian age. Whatever little dramatic output there was, it was very much crude and unsophisticated. And I would like to read out from a novel by Charles Kingsley called Alton Locke. One of the character, while passing by the Victorian Theatre house, remarks, and I quote, "We were passing by the door of the Victorian Theatre. It was just half-price time, and the beggary and the rascality of London were pouring in to their low amusement from the neighbouring gin palaces and thieves' cellars." Unquote. The words that Charles Kingsley has used are beggary and rascality of London. So you can have an idea about the kind of low entertainment that they sought in those days from drama. And even Charles Dickens has also satirized the kind of productions that were put up in London in those days. Most of them were either translated from French drama. In his novel Nicholas Nickleby, Charles Dickens has shown Nicholas going up to a stage manager and asking for a job, and the stage manager asks him, I quote, "Do you understand French?" "Perfectly well." "Very good," said the manager, opening the table drawer and giving a roll of paper from it to Nicholas. "There, just turn that into English and put your name on the title page." Unquote. Now, such was the sorry state of affairs of drama, English drama in the Victorian age. Before George Bernard Shaw came on the literary scene in London, there were some minor dramatists like W.S. Gilbert and T.W. Robertson, and they started writing plays which criticized established societal norms, and they were later on criticized for projecting certain characters which deviated from the Victorian morality. I would like to mention here a play by W.S. Gilbert called Charity. It was written in 1865 when George Bernard Shaw was just 9 years old and living in Ireland. At this time, W.S. Gilbert wrote this unconventional play having the theme of a woman living with a man without getting married. Now, in London, in the Victorian London, this was considered to be the greatest sin. Marriage was considered to be a very sacred institution, and a woman living with a man without getting married was considered blasphemous. So, when this play opened in 1865, it faced protests all over London, and W.S. Gilbert had to suffer financial losses. There was a journal called The Era in which a review of this play was published, and the reviewer had said, I quote, "The play would have had greater success had Gilbert's ending not evinced scornful disregard of certain conventional laws in a writing for the stage." Unquote. In those days, the audience demanded that such deviant people who disobeyed the societal laws had to suffer some kind of boycott, or they had to undergo public ostracism. None of this happened with the case of Mrs. Van Brugge in Charity. She, after the death of her husband, she devoted her life in charity, in social service, and therefore the play was severely criticized by the reading public. Another case that I would like to mention is of a minor dramatist called T.W. Robertson, and he wrote a play called Caste in 1874, and it talked about the class barrier in marriage. Before George Bernard Shaw, these people are said to have pioneered the art of problem play or comedy of idea, and now we move on to comedy of ideas.
Yeah, this is and it is this is also about the state of drama, right?
Okay, there is another quotation by Professor Marriott in his book The Modern Drama. In the last decade of the Victorian age, we find the revival of drama. Whatever I talked about the state of drama was in the later part of the 19th century, but in the last decade, we call it the decadent age, there was a revival of drama, and how drama came out of this slumber, he has shown us in his book The Modern Drama. Marriott says, I quote, "Is it possible to account for the miracle that happened? There is no single explanation. The arrival of the new scenic artist and the stage electrician has revolutionized the production. But the greatest factor of all is undoubtedly the change in the dramatist itself." Now, he calls it the paradigm shift, the change in the dramatist itself. When George Bernard Shaw started writing plays under the influence of Norwegian dramatist Henrik Ibsen, as Rucha ma'am just mentioned, and modern English dramatists were to a very large extent influenced by two major literary figures. One of them was Henrik Ibsen, and the other was Émile Zola, a French dramatist. Friends, you will be surprised to know that Émile Zola started the vogue of naturalism, or what we call realism, in modern literature, and his dramas were so much shocking to the reading public that British Parliament passed a resolution banning the plays of Émile Zola in England, and the English translator, was also imprisoned for translating Zola's plays into English. But it had a positive effect on the English drama by and large, that influenced by social concerns of Ibsen and Émile Zola, these modern English dramatists discarded the melodramatic romanticism and pseudo classical conventions and began to treat in their plays actual English life. So that was the beginning of realism in modern English drama.
Right.
George Bernard Shaw has written a play called You Never Can Tell in 1897, in which there is a dialogue, and I am going to read out it. M. Thomas says, "There is only one place in England where your opinion would still pass as advanced." Mrs. Clarendon says, "The church, I suppose." And M. Thomas says, "No, the theatre." So, in the opinion of George Bernard Shaw, the theatre had relegated even below the church. He did not have high regard for the Christian church, even though he was a Christian by religion. And in this dramatic conversation, he shows theatre to be inferior